Welcome back to my Coding with Cursor AI series. In this series, we've been using Cursor AI to build out a little web app called Horrorverse, which is just a movie rating service for scary movies. And in today's episode, we're going to build out something based on a sketch. We're going to give that to Cursor and have it generate that exact page as much as possible. So let's hop right into the code. If you're new to the series, let me show you what Horrorverse is. It's just this little web app that allows you to rate movies, add it to a watch list, do all that kind of stuff, read reviews. It's not terribly complicated, but we're going to add a feature today that allows us to view our ratings in a much better way. So this is the current ratings page. It's ugly. It's terrible. The contrast is bad. It's not very friendly. It's got this ugly pagination feature at the bottom. You can't do much with it. So we have a sketch. Let me show you this that we're going to work on using. This is just an inspiration sketch, but this is what we want to transform the ratings page into. And you can see that it's more of a big, wide listicle with all the information. Inside of this, let me just show you what we have here. We'll have a movie title of the title of the movie. The date here should be the date that it was rated, so you can see when you rated it or watched it, depending on how you're handling that. A little information about the movie, and then down here, these are the extended ratings that you can give in Horrorverse. And each of these little icons, which we'll have to develop, these are just sketches, right? But each of these icons correlates to the different items that exist inside a title. So if I show you ready or not, when you rate a title in Horrorverse, you actually rate it across all these different spectrums: scares, atmosphere, plot, lore, villain, gore, acting, and unpredictability. And those allow you to, more appropriately find a movie that, tickles your fancy in the scary movie universe. So that isn't as important, except that it's part of our sketch and how we want to present our information. So within this page, we don't have this sketched out. We'll want to have an ability to sort it, to filter it, to take a look at it different ways. And a little subtle thing in this sketch, as you can see, we have watch list ratings and lists, which is not a feature we have today. It is one we will build in a later episode. So without further ado, let's jump into the code. So we have a page here under the list path /list that has a view watch list ratings and watched. We're going to leave watched for now. I know it's all there, but it kind of competes a little bit with ratings, and it's a little confusing as to what the difference is or when you look at one versus the other. So we're going to leave it for now, but long term, we're going to kind of get rid of it. So we want ratings to be a little more comprehensive, and that's why we have some of the information here. We can add some more as we figure out what we want. The first thing we're going to do is figure out where in the code base we are before we even talk about making any improvements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to inspect an element on this page in our developer tools, and I'm going to grab a class, user ratings, movie, poster, container. Let's see, desktop nav menu, user ratings container. Let's take that class. I'll copy that. I'll go over to our code base. This is our IDE. This is Cursor. If you haven't been following along to this point, welcome to Cursor. You can see we have a user ratings container class defined in that style sheet, and we have a component here. This is a React application. We have a component here where that is the only appearance of that class name anywhere in the entire app. So we know that what we're looking at here is the ratings page, or at least where we inspected that element, and it has all the information that we're talking about. Now, we have a significant amount of changes to make to this page. So if we look at this, it's almost not even important what it looks like today. What we want is to tell Cursor what we want it to look like tomorrow. And in order to do that, we're going to have to provide it not only the context of where we are in the app, we're going to have to give it some information about the data, about the model, about all the information that's available to it. And you can see in our sketch, we're assuming that we're going to have access to, and if we don't, we'll have to build it, the date that it was rated by the user that's logged in, the title information, a little bit of information about the movie, and then extended ratings about the movie. Right now, we're only showing your rating, meaning the overall rating, but we don't have any of the extended ratings. Lore, gore, villain, story, plot, whatever else is in that list. So step one we'll want to do is, what data do we have to work with? Before we do anything else, do we have everything we need to make a visual change to the page? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the logic on that component that fetches the ratings, that brings all the ratings in. And what I'm going to do is just debug and print it out, console log it, and take a look at what we're working with. See what we have. Maybe we'll make some adjustments to our sketch before we get involved with anything at all. So we have set ratings. Looks like, okay, so let's take a step back. We're calling the backend API.get /ratings/user page. And it looks like this response object has a data property, and within that property we have ratings, total pages, and current page. And the total pages and current page obviously has to do with the pagination. This ratings thing is what's going to have all of our information in it. So let's add a line here to console log response.data.ratings. I'll save that. And now in our dev tool, when that function fires, which it does at the beginning of the page rendering, it should log out all of that information. So we're recompiled, so I'll just refresh our page here. We'll take a look at our console while that's happening, and we should get that information. So you can see there's 18 titles. 18 titles, it's an array, a bunch of different ratings, and within each of these is an object, and within that object is the information we have to work with. So let's take a peek at this. I'm going to copy this object out of here instead of looking at it there, and we'll just put it in a file here to take a closer look. So every object that's in this ratings is going to give us this. We have overall rating, detailed ratings, which in this case is an empty object, meaning there are no detailed ratings for that one. That's okay. Then a movie title, poster path, release date, created at. We do not have when the user actually rated this title. So we'll do a few things. Before we do that, let's we're still a few steps away from even touching cursor at this point, but let's take a step into the data, into the logic that's fetching these user ratings, and see if we can't add that information into it. So how are we going to do this? Well, let's just work our way backwards. So this API/get/ratings/user is the backend path that we're fetching. All right, so this API object is actually exported from this file right here. So you can see this constant API is axios.create. Axios is a library for making HTTP requests, and it's exported down here. So we have functions that are inside of here. They're all being exported, but we can also directly interact with this API, which already knows where the backend is. You know, that's how it's finding this. And it already knows to use some of the settings that we have set up with credentials. So you can see that we're making a call to go to /ratings/user. Now, let's take a peek over at how we've set up our server, our backend. If we go to server.js, you can see down here we have a set of routers. That's where all the paths are defined. And then we have where we're using it. So /ratings is here at app.use, and we're using the ratings router. So the ratings router, if we look at that file directly, it's going to be in routes, ratings, and let's go back to what we're actually calling /ratings/user. So now we need to find the /user path inside of the ratings router. Woo! Server. Router.get. Remember, we're making a GET request. So here's the /user. So this is actually /API/ratings/user. Is authenticated is some middleware we're using to check if the user is logged in. And here we can see that we're actually making that request. So this is a bit unnecessary here because we're checking if the user is logged in, but we're already running middleware to do that. We're going to ignore that conveniently for now. But here's where we see some interesting things. Here's what's happening. We're on the server now. We're grabbing the ID from the user, from the request object. We're grabbing the page, which is sent in, and we default to 1 if nothing is sent in. We have a limit. We only want to return 18 titles at once. And we have a skip, right? We don't want we don't want any titles that are not on that page. So we do a little math here to make sure that we don't fetch any of those items. And then we have, and this is all built right into the path. So what we're going to do now is adjust this because we're missing some key information that we want. If we go back here, we want the movie information, which we have. Here, I'll fly that out with this here. We want the movie title. We have that. We want the information about the movie, which we don't have. We have the release date, but we don't have the director name. and we don't have the runtime. So this is information that we want to fetch. Now, that information is available to us on the back end. We're just not returning it right now. So what we're going to do is go back to ratings, and we're going to make some adjustments here. Now, we can do this by hand, or we could do this with cursor. Let's do it with cursor. This should be very interesting. Before we do that, I want to set some context. We already have some files that we can use to get information about the movie. We don't have to fetch it from the external API every single time we want something. For example, if we were getting a movie and we went to /find, we have a service called TMDB service and a function in there called search movies. If I go to that service, which is here, we have functions that are available to us to get the movie details. It will search first in that function to see if it can find the movie in our cache. Have we already fetched this information? And then we check, is that information recent? Have we fetched it like recently enough? If not, then we go to the API and get information, because movie information is kind of changing. Older movies not as much, but newer movies are. And that's a big part of what this service will do. So we want to consume a service from TMDB service. That's point number one. Point number two is if I go back here, and that's going to help us get the remaining movie information that we don't have. Point number two is we want to get we have all the ratings. We might not have the extended ratings, right? So if we look in here, the detailed ratings are being returned. This is what we get from the server right now. If we were to debug that again, Wickerman, we can see in our rating, we didn't add any detailed ratings, so they're empty. We wouldn't have any. We wouldn't display it. Let's add a few, and we'll see what that looks like when we debug that. So I'll add all of this stuff here. Submit ratings. Okay, pops up the fright graph there, and now I'm going to go back here. Let's do this, and we'll go to our ratings page. So now the Wicker Man, being the first entry in our array, does have detailed ratings. You can see that. So we don't have to do anything on that front. We don't have to do anything on the title front. The updated at, it looks like I was wrong before. The updated at is the last time that those ratings were updated. So we have this information here. We have the movie information here. We're missing the extended movie information. So let's consume our service to get that. So let me back all the way up and explain like what we have. Everything we're fetching today looks good except for one thing. We're missing the director and the runtime of the movie. Fortunately, our server has access to that information, so we just need to grab that and send that along as well, so that if we were to pull up this debug after making that change, we would have information about the movie itself. And all of that takes place in this TMDB service API. So we have a few options. We could have cursor do that, or we could do that ourselves. Let's do that ourselves in this case. So you can see here, oh snap, check this out. This is within our function. This is where we're actually getting the movie title and the poster path and the release date, but we don't have the runtime of the director. We are looking in our database directly for that movie, but it might not be there. We don't want to do that. We want to consume the TMDB service because that will look there first, and if it's missing something, it will update it and return it to us with everything proper. So instead of doing that, let's consume the TMDB service, and that service being the get movie details, which I believe is being exported. Let's take a peek. Fold. Get movie details is being exported from this module. So in ratings, let's import, or we'll say we want access to that service. We are not importing it already. So we're gonna call this the TMDB movie service, TMDB movie service. We're gonna bring it into this file equals require. And then where is that located? That's inside of our services directory. So parse there, services slash TMDB service dot, well, the .js is optional. So now we have that. And we're going to replace this here. So we're going to say const movie equals await TMDB movie service dot get movie details. And it takes in a movie ID. The movie ID in this case is what? It is the TMDB ID? No, I don't think so. It's the rating.movie ID, which we have access to. Oh, inside of the user ratings, right? We already have the movie ID. So we'll do this, .movie ID. For fun, we will log this out on our server, and then we'll just see kind of, is it giving us what we think? Is it giving us all that information? So I'll save that. And then it's going to do that for all 18 flicks that we're fetching here, but all we have to do is look at one. So I'll refresh that. You can see our server is going to print out a crap ton of stuff. But that's a good sign. It didn't crash, which means it probably has the information that we need. So I'll make that smaller, make this bigger. We can see now that when I debug and print out or log out the movie object, it has a lot of information in it. For any given movie, we have the runtime, director, genres, ID, title. We even have the overview. We have a lot more information available to us now. So we could, now we're explicitly sending back information here about the title and all that. We'll want to add in some additional information. So let's add the runtime, the movie.data, ooh, it's not going to be movie.data anymore. It's going to be movie, I bet. Yeah, see, everything failed here because it's no longer inside of movie.data. It's inside of movie dot runtime. Null is fine as a default. So release underscore date, is that something that's coming through? Keywords, rating. See, I don't see release date here in that information. Oh, there it is. Release date as a string. Okay. Poster path right there. Release date, movie title is coming through as title, movie.title. Default to unknown title. I don't know if that's good or bad. Okay, so let's get rid of our debug. We can get rid of this now. And I'll save that. If we refresh this, we should still have all the information available to us that we had before. There it is. In addition, if we look at our latest debug, if this is the latest that printed out, we can see we now have the runtime, which is in minutes, and we have the movie title, we have detailed ratings, updated at user ID. I guess we only added runtime, didn't we? All that work just for the runtime. Nonetheless, we now have all the data available to us. So we're going to take that data and we're going to now rebuild this page to display that data appropriately. And here's where things are going to get kind of fun. We're actually going to use cursor now. So how many minutes are we in? That took us, we're like 20 minutes in or so. It's crazy. Let's close everything else except for this user ratings page. We don't need that debug out anymore. And we know we have that information available to us. The ratings object for a given title has all the information. So what we want to do now is tell cursor what we're looking for. As before, I always provide as much context to cursor as possible so that it knows exactly what we're doing and what we're working with. And part of what I want to do with that is give it an example of what that data includes. And so I know we got rid of it, but we're going to add it in again. Response.data.ratings. I want to be able to copy a version of that object and provide it to cursor. And since I only want one, I'm just going to grab the first item out of that array. We'll copy that. We'll provide it in our prompt to cursor. So that gives us, we'll refresh our page. Here's our object. I'll copy this object, and for simplicity, well, I'm not going to put it there. If I put it there, then cursor does a weird thing with its code. So we're going to actually create a new object in our notepad, and we'll copy it from here. Okay, so here's our prompt. Let's set the stage for cursor and then tell it what we want. So please study the structure and styles of user ratings. Please look at this component in detail and user ratings.css, noting the way that data is fetched, moved around, and styled, including the naming conventions, including the style sheet class naming conventions. Then make the following improvements. Refer to the rearrange the page so that the titles take up an entire row on the page in a single column, using the attached sketch as a reference for how the layout should appear. The information next to the, let's describe it a little bit so we can tell kind of what's going on. Each row starts with the movie poster on the left and information about the movie and the user's ratings on the right side of the poster. The information shown to the right of the poster is, and now let's describe exactly what it is we're looking at here. So here's our sketch. And I want to be able to see that. So right here we go, is in descending order the user's rating time in the data. This is the movie objects updated at property. The movie title. This is the movie title property. A row of information that includes the release date, which is the release date property. Includes the release date, the director name. We forgot the director name. We'll just be optimistic here, director. The runtime, which is the runtime property. Below that is a row of rating information. For now, only include the value for the overall rating included in the movie object. Is it called a movie object? What are we actually pulling information from? We have rating in the rating object, right? So that's right here. The map operator, we're iterating over the ratings object. So the actual object we're iterating over is going to be referred to as rating. So we almost want to say rating.runtime, rating.release date, rating.movie title, Oops. What else do we have? Rating.director. Rating.overall rating. Oh, I copied a little extra there, didn't I? This would be rating.updated at. Rating. Okay. I think that's got everything. It's a bit of a messy one right now, but let's go back in there. Let's add the director to the server fetch so that we have that, and then we'll come back to all of this. So we know we have the release date, movie, and I'm just going to scroll up here, make sure it comes in as, oh, stay with me. Looks like we maybe lost it. Here it is. Director. It's just literally the property is just called director. That makes things easy. So director, movie.director. Cool. Let's tell it that the values may be null. The value may be null. If that is the case, omit it from the rendering. Just don't show it. Hopefully the title isn't null. That would be a case that we're probably a little fringy case, hopefully, because every movie should have a title. But in the case that something weird happens, we kind of want to account for that. Okay, let's read our prompt in its entirety. See if we're kind of on the right page, because we added a lot. Please study the structure and styles of user ratings and the style sheet, noting the way that data is fetched, moved around. Okay, that's our context. Make the following improvements. Rearrange the page so the titles take up an entire row on the page in a single column using the attached sketch, which we did not attach. Let's do that now. So this guy is going to be somewhere on my computer somewhere. Oh, I think I downloaded it. Let's pull it up. So from our downloads folder, we have this file, and I think I can just drag it in there. There it is. So there's our sketch. Each row starts with the movie poster on the left and the information about the poster and the movie's ratings on the right side of the poster. The information shown to the right is in descending order. The user's rating times, let's key this in as a numbered list. The user's rating time, then it's the movie title, then it's a row of information, and then a row of rating information. For now, include the value for the overall rating. Yeah. Let's give it one more thing. This all takes place in the ratings state value in user ratings. Okay. That's a lot there. I mean, that's a pretty substantial prompt. There's a lot going on. High potential that something weird's going to happen. That's the best time to hit enter. Just see what happens. So let's watch cursor do its thing. And I'll get rid of this. We don't need that. So cursor is generating code. It's looking over all the stuff we gave it. It's interpreting our prompt, and it's doing its best to provide a diff of what the code should be based on what we provided. And it will explain itself a little bit. And the best time to do a code review, for the most part, is at this point in time. So we can see we've added a format date, and it's using raw vanilla JavaScript to handle the date formation. We have a package, I believe, datefns, that is doing this. We'll take a look at that in a second. We may request cursor actually use that instead of raw or vanilla JavaScript. Format runtime, we'll take the minutes and put it in hours and minutes, which is good. That's how we're displaying it in other places in the app. It smokes out a lot of the stuff that's here, and that's okay with us. It's now creating a user ratings list div to host the information, which should look a little bit like what we have there. If we wrap this a little bit, we can see now everything is linked. The entire item in the row is linked. So if you click on anywhere on that, it's going to send that to the movie page, which we don't want. We don't want to necessarily force the user to have to navigate there if they click on anything. Maybe they just want to copy the title name. We'll adjust that in a bit. There's the poster, which has a placeholder. Next to that, we're assuming that this is a row. The content, which will have the format It's using the format date function of the updated app property. Then it has the title, which is an H3. Then it has the metadata, which we assume is some sort of row of information. It's got some spans in there for the release date, director. And see this, rating.director and rating.runtime and, that's if they come through as null. So it's handling that use case for us pretty well. And then at the bottom of that, it's got the overall rating, which will eventually be a row of information, but it's scoring it out of 10. We don't need to put the /10. We'll get rid of that when we get there because all the maxes out of 10, it's kind of redundant in a way, or it's just assumed. Okay, so that's pretty good. I don't know what it's going to look like because I don't have the patience to go through this style sheet and see everything it's changing. But let's be optimistic. We'll accept all and we'll see what it has done to our beautiful ratings page when it's done compiling. Okay, not a terrible first crack at the whole thing. It's centering it, as like a max length list. It's using this red color, which I'm not crazy about in the context of the contrast. I don't think it's very accessible. And we are respecting our pagination, which is pretty tight. So I like what we're doing there. Here's some adjustments I want to make. Let's make this a full, well, it doesn't have to be full width, but I don't want it to be centered. I want it to be left aligned with everything here. So it's kind of like one big list. We also have some adjustments to make because the way that we sketched out this whole thing, we have, I'm pretty stoked about that so far. Our separators should be horizontal lines. I want to keep that instead of putting it on this box shadow floaty thing. One thing I noticed about Cursor when it styles, it loves this thing where you hover over and it pops up an element. It does that with like everything. I don't know if it thinks that's just how the internet works. It's fine. It's not bad. But so if I click on this, it brings me there. So the navigation function works. So now let's provide some feedback. Let's really push Cursor to make this what we need it to be. So I'm not even going to look at the classes. I'm not going to look at any of that. I'm just going to tell it with verbosity, with prose, with English, what I wanted to change. So, as always, you want to complement our AI overload. So this looks great. Here is my feedback. And I'll usually just list out a list of items that I'm noticing. So the entirety of the list of movies is centered horizontally on the page. Change this so that it is left aligned with the navigation above it. We also want to remove the hover effect that raises the item off the screen. Add horizontal rules between items in the list. And let's pick a color. We have a few colors defined in our app, CSS. Let's have it use this background dark variable. Use the bar color for the horizontal rule. Change the overall rating display so that it is just the raw number and not shown out of 10. Also change the color to white. Now, we have the release year, which is fine. We have the runtime, we have the director. How do we distinguish that this is when it was rated versus when it was released? So let's actually add some language. Let's just very clearly call that out. In the row that displays the updated at property, prefix with the text last rated. Okay, let's call that good. We didn't address the linking issue, but we will. So now it's going to go through, and this is almost exclusively a CSS change, minus adding the last rated text, which it will do that. You can see that right there, just past us. And it's going to work on building that out. It injected a React fragment somewhere for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know why it does that kind of stuff. Sometimes these things are a little more complicated than I like them, but that's okay. Let's accept all without doing much of a review to our own fault, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, that's getting there, right? That's getting a lot better. There's this weird space here, which is good. We're gonna add our filter and our ratings total there. And this number here is just kind of awkwardly large. It doesn't quite fit, so we want to prefix it with that little star so that it has some context as to what it is. And let's adjust our navigation capability here, because this list is just feels really incomplete. You know, honestly, it'd be kind of tight if we had the movie description in a single row, and maybe it cuts off when it reaches the end of the row. So let's do that. And for that, we're going to have to go back in and add some information to our backend API to have that information about the title. So let's scroll back up, see if we still have this thing printed out somewhere. Okay. Yes, overview. So we'll call this overview. Overview movie.overview. All right, then. Okay. This is good progress. Please make the following changes. Add a section below the movie meta to show the movie description. It's going to be rating.overview. This description should not wrap in any rows and cut off on the right edge of the list container with ellipses if it extends out that far. Okay. Then adjust the navigation mechanism on the list item such that only when the user clicks on the poster or the movie title does it navigate the user over to the movie page. What else did we notice? Oh, we need to add that little symbol there. So use a star icon on the left side of the overall rating and reduce the font size to around, we'll say 12 pixels or 14 pixels for the number, but 16 pixels for the icon. The pixels end up, or the icons that come in a little small. Use the React icons library to find a good star and make sure the color of the icon is var color brand. That's our red Horrorverse color. What else do we have to change? We're gonna add that. We have that. Let's reduce some of the spacing here. So let's also slightly reduce some of the padding in between the list items so the list is more compact. Like, not too much. Hopefully it doesn't just go totally ham and make a flat burger on us. So it grabbed a star. It's pumping it out, updating the CSS. You know, at this point, there's a lot of code in here that if you wanted to manually update some things, you'd really have to do a level of research to figure out how Cursor is actually structuring things. You can tell Cursor to work a certain way, to code a certain way. I don't have anything set up for that today. So let's accept that. Let's take a peek at what we end up with. Okay, so this is a literal hyperlink, and you can see that it's actually extending out all the way across. So if I click there, but I don't want that. I want the behavior to be only if I click on the text itself. And we do have the text here, but it is the same like faded gray color that makes it seem like a subtitle versus like an actual title. So the last couple changes we'll make in this episode, because we're running a little long, is we're gonna fix this here, and we're gonna adjust that, and we're gonna do that by hand because that just is gonna be a lot easier. So how I'm looking at this is we have this container, and you can see that the content is in this user ratings content container. It's got some padding. Padding is fine. It is just displaying things all the way down, but as a result, every single item inside of it is full width. So I'm going to transform this user ratings content into a flex box. And the reason I'm going to do that is then I can tell items, depending on how long you are, just start at the beginning of the container. Excuse me. And then don't get any longer. And that's one way we can handle that situation. Oh boy. Okay, so here's our style sheet. And our style sheet, we'll fly that over there. And then here we can see, here's where the user rating item actually is. We're gonna change this to be a display flex direction column. No gap or anything, but we'll say this, justify content, flex start. And that will ensure everything is left aligned in our case. Okay, so after that change, you can see that it didn't help us at all. Oh, and that's because flex start, rating title link. Oh, not justify content. We want align items, flex start, not justify content. Because we are not in a row, we are in a column. Okay, and you can see what happened now. It unbounded the entire thing to fit the largest, see this movie overview for the deliverance is super freaking long. And it'll just blow up everything that we have. So we actually need to make some adjustments. This is where I might have cursor hop back in and help us. But you can see now, if I click next to Wickerman, nothing happens, and only on Wickerman does it happen. And we don't want to style with this, we want this this link to actually not have its decoration, not have its underline until it's hovered. And then even then we don't want it to be colored of any kind. So we'll Control F, we'll find where this link is defined. Funny enough, we're using this class, but it doesn't have a definition. So we'll put one for that class here. So we'll say text, decoration none, color unset. And now it behaves like a link. If we hover over it, it gets an underline. If not, it doesn't do anything, and that's great. That's exactly how we want that to look. Now let's adjust this text here. So user ratings overview, and it has a color defined. If I don't define it in that class here, if I toggle that, you can see it looks a little more like what we expect, but we want maybe the font size to be a little bigger. So let's get in there. Only instance of the class, we'll remove that. We'll set this to be 1 rem. I'll take a peek at that. That looks better. Now we just have to fix this unbounded content. So what I want to do here is have cursor know that we made some changes. We don't want it to overwrite things to think that something went wrong. So I made a few changes. One of the things you have to fix is to stop the overview from overflowing in the main container. It should cut off at the edge and not and become ellipses if it has to be longer. Boy, I didn't really give it much information at all. I just hope it knows what we mean with overview. So let's see what it's proposing. So in our CSS, it's saying, hey, this overview should be width 100%. I don't believe that's actually going to fix everything, but oh, it did add it in a few places. Okay, so let's accept that and take a peek. That actually worked. I'm surprised because I don't know. It's just an area I typically have issues with. So you can see this is neat. That way we have a constant height of our container. You know, long descriptions or no description is going to be there. We want to add a minimum height to this so that if the description isn't there, like movies that haven't been released yet, I don't know how you would rate those, but fringe case, we'll add a height that exists, a minimum height. So we'll say that this class should have, what are we at right now? The height of it for these is 20 pixels tall. So we'll just give it a minimum height, and you see it has a margin bottom. We'll leave the margin. The margin is fine. The margin can stay. We'll say the minimum height equals 20 pixels. In here, we'll want to render it regardless. So we'll actually give it a default value. We won't need the minimum height because we're doing this, but we'll have it render. Actually, we don't need to do that. We'll get rid of all of that. We'll keep this. And inside of this, we'll have if rating.overview is defined, if it's truthy, we'll show it. If not, we'll say no movie description exists. And we will always render this element because we're handling our use case of what goes in it inside of it. So just for fun, let's just flip it around, or let's just say if there is no movie overview. Nope, that doesn't work. That was like the totally wrong logic. Oh, no, that was fine. No movie descriptions. So that's what we can expect it to look like if there's nothing there. And you know what? That looks okay. So we're not all the way to this page. And honestly, there's some work to do. We have some padding issues here, but I think that's enough to wrap up for this episode. Let me show you one last thing. We're going to have Cursor actually generate our commit message because it can do that. And like I said in a previous episode, it can get kind of long, but it's a little bit funny. So let's fix this to be the right logic. Let's pop back over to this and say, hey, Cursor, tell us what we did. So literally generate commit message, and it's going to be life story. Refactor user ratings component and API integration updated. You know, it's not wrong. It's just, it's a lot. And depending on how you work with your team, you may need that. If you're just kind of running things solo, you don't need something that quite substantial, but I don't mind having it there. So we'll commit that. We'll push that up to our repository, and that is all for this episode. In the next one, we'll look at making some adjustments to this page as a whole, to building out a lists feature, which will require some backend changes, and that's kind of fun to see what Cursor does with that. So anyways, hope you learned something. Hope the weather's good where you are, and I'll see you in the next episode.